Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman, and we're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Lance, good to see you. Katie, good to see you as always. Boy, Lance, we got a lot of information, and it keeps on piling up.
Bob, I get up every morning with a cup of coffee and just pull up Google and type in PPP, and there's always plenty to read about.
Yeah, and then it's time for lunch. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Hey, thanks to Liberty SBF. They're sponsoring our show from time to time. So shout out to them. They're involved 504 in conventional financing. Hey, send your questions, Joseph, Katie, or myself. Our email is very difficult. It's all our first names at ColemanReport.com. So actually, is it Caitlin at Coleman Report?
It's Katie. I double checked.
Yeah. Okay, it's Katie, and then we got Lance, and of course I'm Bob, and there's your certificate. So let's get into the content. Should SBA Care Section 1112 payments be broken out with interest and principal? What the issue here is, when we report the payments to Coleman, we're simply reporting the gross amount of the loan. Katie, why is this an issue?
Well, we yesterday got an OIG report that was basically saying that they were recommending that the SBA do this and separate it. The SBA then said that that was not necessarily the best idea because it would cost a lot of money to do that and put an unnecessary burden on the lender. So they had some different recommendations, which we'll get to later in the program.
Lance,
that's incredibly confusing to me because, you know, while I don't work in loan admin, if you don't post it to interest and principal, you're going to end up with past due loans. For instance, if you just did principal reductions and didn't pay the interest to date with that CARES Act payment, you end up with a past due loan.
Yeah, and I know SBA, the management pushed back by saying it would take some software infrastructure changes, that they weren't ready to put that burden on the lender. But that's interesting, those results. Well over half the industry says, yeah, let's break it out.
And I think a majority of the industry did post it like a normal payment, which was what it seemed the CARES Act indicated it should be, is posting it as a normal payment to that SBA loan, which would have principal and interest.
This comes from the SBA. Every year they issue the top challenges to what they believe SBA management is facing. When I say SBA management, I'm talking about the government. What do they say? These are all challenges, so we all understand they're all correct answers. But they prioritize them, and they got it right.
Yes, we saw this. This is from the report that came out late October, and it was focusing on the CARES Act programs and how they were helping, and it looked at the biggest challenges moving forward into fiscal year 2021. And the OIG did say that fraud was going to be a big issue that they were going to have to focus on a lot in the coming year.
And we organized the answers to go ahead and go back, Joseph. We organized the answers as they were. So 2 was inaccurate data, 3 was IT security risk, and 4 was oversight. So Lance, we stole it directly from SBA. Any comment on oversight of lenders and loan agents? Personally, I think that would have been higher.
I would have thought it would have been higher as well. And the fraud, we didn't talk a lot about, I mean, there was fraud in the SBA lending program prior to PPP, but it really, you know, the PPP program brought it out to where we read about it on a daily basis in the news outlets. You didn't hear a lot about SBA fraud, SBA borrower fraud prior to PPP. I would have thought that oversight of SBA lenders would be at least number 1 or number 2.
Yeah. And when we talk about IT security risk, I know that's outside our realm of expertise, but you should be aware that the Inspector General is very concerned about that. which means if they're concerned about it from an SBA level, they're also probably concerned at your level. So look to become more of an expert in IT routers. I don't know, whatever that is. Finally, this is a conversation Lance and I had yesterday, and I was molded over. And what are you going to do in 2021? Does your budget include, we're going to send people to national conferences, just regional, we're just new local events, or we're going to continue to slash expenses and build up that bottom line? Wow. Lance?
Well, I am hoping that we get back to normal where we all get to come together at SBA lending conferences. So I'm hoping that we see banks that are spending money on travel and networking events. But it appears, Bob, that quite a number of the banks are slashing expenses. And I think financial institutions this year, Bob, probably are looking at their travel budget in 2019 versus 2020 and saying, wow, we saved a lot of money this year. But long term, what's best for the industry is that we do have those training events, those networking events. So I hope all your institutions decide to spend some money and send you to a conference.
Yeah, at least support the local events. I read across an interesting article yesterday. The FDIC came out with their third quarter report and said all banks are doing pretty well on a profitable basis. That's one of the reasons we don't see every Friday afternoon the notices of bank closures as we did 10 years ago. We were getting 2 or 3 a day. So that's good news. So bank profitability is up. The way the accounting is, delinquencies are very low, right, Lance? And when is that time bomb going to hit? When next year?
I think we're going to start seeing delinquencies related to the pandemic first quarter. We have had federal government support that have propped up quite a number of industries and businesses, and unless they pass something pretty quick, which it does not appear they're going to do, Bob. I was reading about that bipartisan, bicameral, whatever it is, bill. Well, there it is.
No, wait a minute. You're off script. That's Katie. Right, it's coming up.
But I have some concerns if they don't do something in the next week or so, that it will be after the inauguration. And if that's the case, we're going to see quite a number of delinquents.
Hey, I'm glancing at the numbers. Thank you all for your support. If for some reason you want to go back, if you missed the first 5 minutes, we do record all of these. They are on a YouTube archive. Send an email to Mike at colemanreport.com. He'll forward you. But we archive them, everything. So for some reason you want to go back, or even miss a day, you can always go back. So they're up on that list. All right, Katie, the $908 billion bicameral relief framework. And where's the favorite line? You guys cut the line. What's the line, Katie?
Which line are you talking about?
The stupidity.
Oh, yeah. Basically, this is trying to push for more funding for COVID relief. It's not just for PPP, but there's also a pretty significant list of other things that are getting funding. This is part of a larger bill. Specifically, what we do know about this portion of it so far is that it's going to include a second draw for PPP, additional funding for EIDL loans, and some kind of additional aid for restaurants, live entertainment venues, and more. They haven't really described what more is going to be yet. We don't have the exact wording of this bill yet. Unfortunately, it's just a framework proposal. It has, oh, great, we've got the list there. There's 9 senators backing it. This is all part of the Problem Solvers Caucus. 4 Republicans, 1 independent, 4 Democrats, and 7 representatives who are also backing it, 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats. So it does have a lot of support right now, and it's very likely that some version of this will get passed with how much support it's gained already.
The quote I was looking for was the Senator Mark Warner quote. Do you have that offhand? That was a great quote that he said about the program.
No, unfortunately, I don't.
Joseph, you got that? Anyway, well, that was all right. That's the one I like, but we'll see if we can dig that up before. So the problem with that, though, Katie, is we don't have specifics, correct?
Right. That all we know is there's going to be a second draw and some funding for EIDL. I looked at a list earlier that listed, I don't know, maybe about a dozen other things that are getting funding, but within that SBA section, there's not a lot of information about that yet.
Okay, yeah. So, but the good news is this is bipartisan, and they're pushing for that. And I think someone's going to bail me out here. I hear the printer printing, so we'll see what happens. Nope. All right. Well, I'm going to get that. It was a great quote. We had what talk to us about the next thing, Inspector General, and here it is. Stupidity on steroids.
I hadn't heard that yet. That's one way to put it. I mean,
if we don't get this done. Go ahead, Katie. Yeah,
the big problem is you've seen Congress. Sometimes they're working beyond their hours, and sometimes they're really hitting that date where they really want to go back home. So it's really a toss-up how long they're going to be in session handling this, because I could see them lasting a little bit longer just to try to pass this if it gets close to passing. But we are talking about the Christmas holidays, and people want to go home. So it's a big problem right now.
Yeah, and Lance, I don't view that as a partisan statement. I view that as really just a frustration statement, but I love it. I mean, talking about
well, the senator probably is incredibly frustrated, like we all are. We've been talking about the need to have additional stimulus passed for several months, and if I sat in his chair, I probably would have said, well, something a little more politically correct, Bob, but probably would be at the end of my rope as well. And they really need to get together. And I continue to read articles, and 2 or 3 different possible bills are out there, but they just need to do something.
Yeah. So so even though nothing is moving, there's a lot of inner workings that are pushing this. Real quick, Katie, what's going on with the Inspector General report? We're talking about debt relief payment controls. So how does that affect us?
So this is going to be the 1112 debt relief payments, and this is a report that came out yesterday, I believe, during our webinar. And basically the OIG was saying that they found the possibility of $43 million in subsidy payments that may have went to ineligible borrowers. And, well, of course, the SBA still needs to verify those numbers and everything. It is a concern, and they were saying that they had a couple of recommendations. The first recommendation was the one that we were discussing earlier on the show. They said to incorporate procedures to verify the accuracy and reasonableness of the loan status by breaking it into principal, interest, and fees. Their second recommendation was to establish a post-payment audit process. The SBA responded by saying that breaking it into the payments separately would be a problem because it would be too much for the lender. What they instead said they would like to do is proactively address the recommendation by taking additional steps to validate the total payment amount requested by comparing it to the terms of the loan. So they are addressing the issue. They just don't want to address it the way the OIG had recommended.
Yeah, and obviously our survey is unscientific, but it's pretty good. Well over half the industry says, yeah, we don't have a problem with that. So we don't need to add more stress to SBA management, but hey, the numbers, they are what they are. We have some questions, Lance. Number one, Dylan wants to know, do forgiveness apps need to be submitted 10 months after the end date of their covered period?
Well, they need to be submitted by them, but it's okay if they're submitted earlier than that, Bob. There's a deadline for submission of your forgiveness applications. The covered periods have ended for all PPP borrowers. They can gather their information and submit whenever they're ready. And, I've had conversation with a number of PPP borrowers who are queuing up their information for submission after the first, for forgiveness.
First,
And,
yeah. Question to Katie from Raman. Do you know the bill number for the bicameral proposal?
Since it's just a framework, I don't believe it's actually been submitted yet. So we don't have a bill number yet. It's just going to be basically a draft with a bunch of concepts listed. So there's no bill number yet.
Jim wants to know, are 1112 payments taxable to the borrower?
That's a great question, Jim, and I'm not sure about that because it's really no different than PPP loan funds. I mean, it was for lack of a better word, a gift to the small business borrower, and that is an excellent question, whether they're forgivable. The other question that comes to mind, Bob, since we talked about PPP loans, and the IRS says you can't deduct the payroll that was paid with PPP loan funds, what about the interest that is paid on the CARES Act payment? Can they continue to deduct that interest?
I'm out of the prognostication business, as obviously those of you who follow Lance and I, and I'll throw Katie into the bus also. All three of us, we tend to, sometimes we're just guessing. But on that one, based on the letters and based on the original intent of the legislation, I think that it will not be taxable. But again, we're still in a world where the states are saying, hey, until someone tells us no, we're going to tax that at the state level. Katie, tell me what you're doing on our guide. That's pretty interesting. And what is the product? What do we do on this, Katie?
So this is a great guide, and the benefit to getting this guide is that it's updated almost weekly as things come out. If there's any kind of news, I will update it, and you get a new copy on Friday with all the updates. So if you're trying to follow along on forgiveness, it's great to make sure that you know everything that's going on and all the most recent information. It includes some nice little infographics toward the beginning, summaries of the different forms that you can be using, and a summary of basically every forgiveness related IFR, every mention of forgiveness in those IFRs. It goes through and summarizes those so you can quickly figure out where you got the information from and if it's still the most accurate information.
Right. And Lance, Katie's been kicking and screaming about learning infographics, but she's doing a pretty good job with that. Katie, you getting more comfortable?
Yeah, it's a slow process. I do enjoy having some infographics, especially with PPP, trying to figure out how the forgiveness process works based on the text is just a little confusing. So I think it's nice to have some of those things.
Lance is going to be doing a webinar next week. Lance, what are you going to be doing? What's the emphasis on this PPP update forgiveness webinar?
We've done a PPP forgiveness webinar before. We're just going to bring updated information into it and try to give you the information that's necessary to navigate PPP forgiveness with your borrowers.
Yeah. And all those who register for that will receive the guide as well. Brian just wants to confirm the applications do not have to be submitted by the 10-month period. It just has to be submitted by then, as Lance said, if they want to avoid having to start making payments. Per the FAQ, quote, borrowers may submit a loan forgiveness application at any time before the maturity date of the loan, which is either 2 or 5 years from loan origination. So Brian, thank you very much for that.
Right.
And great. Okay. So we also had some scheduling conflicts. So we're moving our secondary market summit for a couple weeks. And we finalized the agenda with the correct speakers and the correct time slots. So that would be a great program. I know you're all busy. I know we're all working to hit our year-end stuff. Lance, thank you for your time. Katie, thank you for your time. And thank you for joining us today for Coleman Report Update and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a great afternoon.